The Stephenville sightings, UFO over the president's ranch, a mile-long craft flies toward Bush's Texas ranch as F-16s scramble, and the military lies about it, all captured on radar. Late winter darkness settles over the ranch country of Erath County, Texas, on the evening of January 8, 2008. The town of Stephenville, population approximately 17,000, sits quiet beneath clear skies. Across the county, in Dublin and the surrounding rural communities, residents go about their evening routines with no expectation that the next several hours will transform their understanding of what moves through American airspace. At various locations across the county, witnesses look up. What they see defies the familiar patterns of commercial aviation, military exercises, or astronomical phenomena. The object appears massive beyond any conventional aircraft. Estimates will later describe it as approximately 1 mile in length. It moves silently, an impossibility for any known craft of such scale operating at the low altitude witnesses observe. White lights strobe across its surface in patterns that do not correspond to standard navigation lighting. Some witnesses report a red glow emanating from portions of the craft. It moves slowly, deliberately, at an altitude variously estimated between 300 and several thousand feet, depending on observer location and proximity. Ricky Sorrells stands on his property outside Stephenville, a welder by trade, a man accustomed to the physical properties of metal and machinery. What passes above him bears no relationship to anything in his professional experience. The object appears flat, enormous, without visible seams or rivets. He observes no wings, no tail assembly, no engines or exhaust ports. The surface appears seamless, impossibly smooth for something of such scale. He estimates its altitude at approximately 300 feet above the treetops, close enough that conventional aircraft at such altitude would generate catastrophic noise. This craft produces nothing, no sound, no downdraft, no turbulence. Sorrells watches it for an extended period, long enough to eliminate the possibility of misidentification or brief visual confusion. The object is real, physical, and present in the airspace above his land. Across Erath County, other witnesses observe the same phenomenon from different vantage points. Among them are pilots, individuals with professional aviation experience and detailed familiarity with aircraft recognition. Business owners watch from their properties. A constable, a law enforcement officer trained in observation and reporting, witnesses the object and documents what he sees. The witnesses do not know each other, have no coordination, and report their observations independently through different channels. Yet their descriptions align with remarkable consistency. A massive, silent craft with distinctive lighting moving at low altitude through the night sky over rural Texas. Then the jets arrive. F-16 fighter aircraft, fast and loud, appear in the airspace shortly after the initial object sightings. Witnesses observe the jets moving in patterns that suggest pursuit or investigation. The contrast between the two types of craft becomes immediately apparent. The F-16s scream through the sky with the characteristic roar of military turbofan engines, while the massive object they appear to follow produces no sound whatsoever. The jets move with the speed and maneuverability expected of modern fighter aircraft. The object continues its slow, deliberate course, apparently unaffected by the military presence. The official response begins with denial. When news outlets contact the military seeking comment on the reported sightings and the presence of F-16s in the area that evening, the response is unequivocal. No military aircraft operated in that airspace on January 8, 2008. The statement is clear, specific, and presented as fact. For witnesses who observed the jets with their own eyes and ears, the denial creates immediate cognitive dissonance. The sound of F-16s at low altitude is unmistakable to anyone who has heard it. The denial is not ambiguous. It is a direct statement that what witnesses observed did not occur. Then the denial collapses. Approximately 2 weeks after the initial statement, the military reverses its position. Naval Air Station, Joint Reserve Base Fort Worth acknowledges that F-16s from the installation were indeed operating in the Stephenville area on the evening of January 8. The reversal includes no explanation for the initial false denial. The corrected statement confirms the jets were present, but maintains they were not pursuing anything unusual. They were conducting routine training operations. The explanation fails to address why routine training would require an initial false denial, or why such training would occur in the specific location and timeframe of the mass civilian sighting. The Mutual UFO Network, known as MUFON, initiates a formal investigation. The organization's approach focuses on obtaining objective data rather than relying solely on witness testimony. Investigators file a Freedom of Information Act request seeking radar data from the evening of January 8 from the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA complies, releasing radar records from the time period in question. The data arrives as raw radar returns, technical information requiring specialized expertise to interpret accurately. Glenn Scholes, a retired air traffic control specialist with decades of experience reading and analyzing radar data, examines the records alongside Robert Powell, a research chemist with technical analysis skills. What they find in the data confirms the witnesses' accounts and extends the case into documented technical evidence. The radar returns show an unidentified object in the airspace over Erath County during the timeframe of the sightings. The object performs maneuvers inconsistent with conventional aircraft. Sudden directional changes, speed variations, and movement patterns that do not correspond to commercial aviation, private aircraft, or standard military flight profiles. Most significantly, the trajectory analysis reveals a disturbing detail. The unidentified object moves on a course toward Crawford Ranch, the Texas property of President George W. Bush, who at the time holds office as the sitting president of the United States. The ranch serves as the Western White House, a location where the president conducts official business and receives security protection commensurate with a head of state. The airspace around presidential residences operates under the most restrictive protocols in American aviation. No-fly zones enforced by immediate military response to any incursion. Yet the radar data shows an unidentified object moving toward this protected airspace without apparent interception or identification. The radar analysis undergoes peer review by aviation professionals. The authenticity of the FAA radar data itself is confirmed. These are genuine radar returns from functioning FAA systems, not fabricated or manipulated records. The object in the data is real in the sense that something physical generated those radar returns. What that something was remains unidentified and unexplained by any official source. Ricky Sorrells continues to speak publicly about what he observed. In multiple interviews with news outlets and investigators, he maintains his account without embellishment or dramatic elaboration. His description remains consistent across tellings: an enormous, silent, seamless craft at low altitude, unlike anything in his experience or understanding. He reports a troubling aftermath to his public statements. In the days and weeks following his interviews, he observes F-16s making low-altitude passes over his property, flights that appear to him to serve no training or operational purpose beyond surveillance. The jets fly low enough and frequently enough that he interprets their presence as a response to his willingness to speak about what he witnessed. The national media coverage of the Stephenville case extends beyond the typical regional interest in UFO reports. The military's false denial and subsequent forced correction creates a narrative of institutional dishonesty that journalists find compelling independent of beliefs about the object's origin. The radar data's trajectory toward a presidential residence adds a national security dimension that moves the story from curiosity to potential crisis. News outlets from major networks cover the case, interview witnesses, and report on the radar analysis findings. The case produces no official resolution. The military provides no explanation for what the F-16s were doing in the area beyond routine training, an explanation that does not account for the initial denial or the correlation with mass civilian sightings. The FAA offers no identification of the object in the radar data. No debris is recovered, no landing sites are documented, no physical trace evidence is collected. The object arrives, moves through protected airspace, and departs without official acknowledgement of its nature or origin. The Stephenville sightings establish a documented pattern. Credible witnesses, including aviation professionals and law enforcement, observe an unidentified craft. Radar data confirms an anomalous object in the same timeframe and location. Military aircraft respond in a manner suggesting pursuit or investigation, and official explanations either contradict documented evidence or remain absent entirely. The trajectory toward Crawford Ranch transforms the case from a curiosity into a security question. If unidentified craft can penetrate the airspace around a presidential residence without interception or identification, what does that reveal about the actual state of American airspace security versus the officially stated capabilities? The radar analysis conducted by Schultz and Powell represents the most rigorous technical investigation of the case. Their work demonstrates that UAP investigation can extend beyond witness testimony into objective, documentable data subject to peer review and professional analysis. The trajectory calculation toward Crawford Ranch, derived from authentic FAA radar returns, gives the Stephenville case a political dimension unique in modern American UAP reports. Documented evidence of an unidentified object approaching the residence of a sitting president. Years later, the Stephenville case remains a reference point in discussions of government transparency regarding UAP phenomena. The documented false denial by the military, later corrected, demonstrates institutional reluctance to acknowledge military activity even when that activity is observed by dozens of civilians. The question persists: if the F-16s were conducting routine training, why did that fact require an initial denial? What specifically about the military's presence in the area that evening warranted an attempt to deny it occurred? The witnesses continue their lives in Erath County, but the memory of that January evening remains vivid. For those who observed the massive, silent craft at close range, no official denial or non-explanation can erase what they saw with their own eyes. For Ricky Sorrells, who watched the object pass overhead at 300 feet, close enough to see its seamless surface and impossible silence, the experience permanently altered his understanding of what exists in American airspace without official acknowledgement. The Stephenville sightings stand as documented evidence that something unidentified operated in the airspace over Texas on January 8, 2008, that military jets responded to that presence, that radar data confirms an anomalous object on a trajectory toward a presidential residence, and that the initial official response to these events was a demonstrable falsehood. These facts remain on record, confirmed by multiple sources, and without adequate official explanation. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.